Hello again, my name is Steve Hillis, and this is going to be the last in a long series of videos on major sociological perspectives. Now, this video is targeted more at my social problems class, but I will make it available to my intro class because it will give them a little more feedback on these major sociological perspectives. As a little background for them, let me point out a couple things that we've already made clear in our social problems class. First of all, that these various sociological perspectives can be applied to a wide range of social problems, and that depending upon which social perspective you employ, you tend to approach different problems in different ways, look at different problems in different ways. You ask different questions, you focus on different variables, you study different problems in different ways, sometimes using different methods, and ultimately you come, in most cases, to different conclusions. Largely that's because you're making different assumptions about society and human nature. So of course, you tend to emphasize different things and reach different conclusions in terms of why and how these social problems are occurring. Now, we also pointed out that when we began to talk about social problems or issues, it's almost natural to begin to talk about social solutions and remedies. We've got a problem. This is how the problem works. What are we going to do about the problems? In essence, talking about social problems lends itself to talking about social solutions. And finally, I need to emphasize that these major sociological perspectives often offer very different insights into what kinds of solutions might be desirable when attacking various types of social problems. Even when you're looking at the same particular problem, or at least a very similar one, a functionalist tends to offer very different kinds of approaches or solutions than a conflict theorist, who in turn a lot of times offers different solutions or remedies than an interactionist. Here we'd like to very quickly touch on different approaches offered by different perspectives. Let's start out with conflict theorists. Conflict theorists can be more or less radical. Conflict theorists, at least the radical conflict theorists, attribute many of society's problems to the way it's organized, that it's a rigged game, that it works to the interests of the powerful, the well-organized, the rich, the fat cats, the people that are in government, large corporations, and so forth. And it hurts people who are poorly organized, who are poor, who are less educated, people who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic strata. In essence, it's a society that's built to maintain and reproduce patterns of inequality. It's a society based on perpetual imbalances of power. It's a society that's unjust and unequal. And it's a society that generates many serious social problems for the mass of people, but especially for the people at the bottom. And it works that way because of the way the society is organized. So, these more radical conflict theorists basically want to tear society apart at its roots. They want to reinvent society. Karl Marx is a good example, a revolutionary who wanted to overthrow the capitalist system. And in the process, he didn't want to just get rid of capitalism and money and banks and so forth. He didn't want to just have ownership, or he didn't want to just have collective ownership of the means of production. He wanted to go farther than that. He believed that a truly communist society might not have families. Religion would fade away. Everything would change. And he certainly believed that many of the social problems that we have today in a capitalist system would slowly either disappear or at least get a lot better, because the problems themselves were rooted in the capitalist system. The only way to get rid of them is get rid of capitalism. Now, a radical perspective to be sure. But not all conflict theorists are so radical. Some of them, frankly, are more of the typical social engineering variety of activists. They support various government solutions and policies to improve the social world to address particular social problems. Many of them do support or emphasize redistributional politics, taking from the rich, giving to the poor, in various ways picking up people at the bottom, and maybe taking away from those at the top. They tend to support policies that would produce more equality, or that they believe would produce more equality, not just in terms of wealth and income, but in terms of access and opportunities, in terms of access to a wide range of social resources and so forth. The more equal society becomes, the better, at least to some degree. And more generally, they would tend to support a wide range of social interventions by the government to address a wide range of social problems. Now, not all of those solutions would necessarily be of the redistributionist variety or higher taxes on the rich or programs for the poor. It might be support for gun control, or it might be support for better education for young people to avoid engaging in risky sex. They might support a wide range of very active government interventions where we all get together and try to change the social world together. Frankly, many of them are adamantly in favor of constantly promoting social change, particularly if that social change involves greater social justice and more equality for the larger society. Now, some conflict theorists may go, or maybe even a little more humble or moderate in their approaches. Some of them may go down to the community level, trying to work with groups of people and try to help them organize, with groups of people who are down and out, groups of people who are poorly organized or low in power. One way is to basically go to them and in various ways help them organize, help them form social movements, help them protest, help them fight back. Sometimes you go to the underdog and you help them rise up, you help them get better at organizing themselves and improving their own situation. Or maybe you go into communities and you try to help people negotiate better outcomes, better solutions to their conflicts. Maybe you engage in conflict resolution, helping people who are fighting with each other, who are arguing about contentious issues, helping them come up with resolutions or solutions for themselves that solve their own problems. Now, those kinds of solutions tend to be more at the grassroots, they tend to be more communitarian, and usually a little less political, a little less radical. That's all I wanted to say on conflict theory solutions or remedies. Now let's move on to functionalists. Functionalism tends to be the most conservative of all our perspectives. They're very cautious when approaching social solutions or problems, in large part because they believe that society is adaptive, self-repairing, self-healing. Problems have a way of working themselves out. But that doesn't mean that some functionalists weren't social engineers, because frankly, a lot of them were. But they were cautious social engineers. They were careful because they believed that rapid social change was problematic. They were not revolutionaries. They believed that rapid, uncontrolled, large-scale social change was very disruptive. It could create anarchy, chaos, weaken social norms, or anomie. That could create or exacerbate many social problems. You didn't want to make the situation worse. Like a doctor, the first rule of thumb was first do no harm. Be cautious, be careful, be deliberative. Use functional analysis to carefully approach social problems and issues. I'll give you an example there. Say you're looking at gang activity and you're worried that gangs create so many problems for their members and for their surrounding communities. Gangs are there for a reason. They do produce positive consequences for their members, or at least some positive consequences, and probably positive consequences indirectly for some other groups of people too, although they very clearly cause problems too. How do you control gangs, reduce their problems, maybe eliminate gangs? Well, the idea is you use functional analysis to understand how and why gangs exist in the first place, why they persist. Then and only then are you in a good position to intelligently address the problems caused by gangs. Once you identify the positive consequences of gangs, then maybe you can find functional alternatives or substitutes, less destructive ways of providing the same positive consequences for the people involved. So, if gangs provide social support, entertainment, ways of blowing off steam, income, safety, or at least reducing certain kinds of threats to the gang members, you focus on those consequences for them, and you try to figure out other ways, better ways, safer ways, more pro-social or peaceful ways of producing the same positive consequences for gang members without producing all the crime and violence. Maybe you come up with boys clubs, ways that the kids can earn money, various other social activities that kids can engage in so that they aren't bored. You provide substitutes or alternatives. And by doing so, you're beginning to remove the very reason that gangs exist, and presumably gangs will change. They may shrink, they may disappear, and even if they don't disappear, they may begin to behave themselves better. Again, you start out with your analysis, and based on what you find out, you try to solve the problem in a very productive, very careful way. More generally, a lot of functionalists believe that social problems are rooted in the breakdown of social institutions and organizations. If something's going wrong under the hood of your car, you don't just start banging on it, randomly tearing apart parts. You try to identify what part is breaking down, and you try to fix it. Likewise, if a part of society, an organization or institution is malfunctioning, the first trick is to figure out what's going wrong, when and where. Focus your efforts there, do functional analysis, do research, and then carefully figure out the least disruptive, most effective and efficient way to solve that problem. You troubleshoot, you fix things. It's kind of the approach that a mechanic uses as opposed to a revolutionary. Finally, let's talk about interactionists. Interactionists approach social problems from still another perspective, and they tend to come up with very different kinds of social solutions as a result. They tend to view social problems through the lens of interaction and meaning and so forth. So, if they believe a social problem is there, they may very well try to change how people view that social problem, how they view their behavior, how they view their own activity. If you're trying to reach out to homeless people and get them to come to shelters more, you have to understand how they view homelessness, how they view shelters, how they view the police. You go out and you study them. And once you have a better understanding of how they interpret each other and other people, how they look at themselves, then you're going to be in a lot better position to change their minds and to change their behavior. A lot of times that might be going out and working with counselors and therapists, going out and having social workers go out and work with the homeless and contact them. In other cases, you might use PR campaigns like designing better anti-drug programs for kids in schools, or better anti-drug ads for television. Again, getting a better sense of how and why people use drugs in the first place, how they view drug use, why they use drugs, and so forth. Then, based on that knowledge, you try to change their minds, change the way they view it, and if you succeed, you're able to change their behavior. Now, that's only one way in which social interactionists approach or attack social problems. We could talk about others, but frankly, we're running out of time. I will point out one other thing about social interactionists. Social interactionists may also be very skeptical or critical about who gets to define what kinds of solutions and what kinds of problems there are in the first place. Sometimes their social solution or remedy is to redefine the social problem. If people are running around trying to burn witches and they think witches are a social problem, social interactionists may very well sit there and go, wait a minute. The issue here isn't how to burn witches more effectively or how to keep people from engaging in witchcraft. The problem is how society defines deviance, how society defines social problems. The problem may be the society falsely believes in witches. They're persecuting innocent people. They're creating deviance. They're making people into deviants who are really innocent, who aren't harming anyone, or maybe are only harming themselves. Interactionists may very well challenge the whole issue of what is a social problem in the first place and who gets to define a social problem. And sometimes their social solution is to redefine the social problem. At any rate, that finishes up our lecture series on social problems, social solutions, and remedies. And it finishes up our lecture series on major sociological perspectives. Thank you very much. Have a good day.